had to deal with this particular issue, where one new employee has joined, and after joining, within 2 days, there was a committee which was constituted to select a particular vendor to provide some services. And this employee was supposed to be on the committee, and this employee manager. And when she went through the list of vendors that are supposed to be considered by the committee, she found that a very close friend's father's company is one of the company that has been shortlisted for being the vendor selection. And obviously, she had the option of either going through the process and knowing that it is her close friend's father's company, go and award the contract to that company, or not to be influenced by such proximity or acquaintance. It's not acquaintance, much more than acquaintance. It's a very close friend's father. So many times she would have visited his place, and she would have probably had food. As kids, they would have played together, the children. So all those things would definitely, recycle in her mind when this particular issue is going on. So what does she do in such a situation? It's a conflict of interest. And how does she deal with this? This is something which I had to deal with it, because nice of her, she walks up to me. I was the controlling officer. She walks up to me. She says, "Sir, I have a dilemma, and I'm not able to decide. But I would like you to, advise me. And if you don't want to advise me, my decision is this: that I would like to be recused. I would like to be relieved from this responsibility of being on this committee, because this committee is to screen the applications of companies which are shortlisted. In the shortlisted companies, one of my close friends' father's company is involved." Okay. So obviously, I had told her, "Good, nice, you have told us this." She could have quietly actually gone ahead and probably selected, because she knows that they were there in the shortlisted companies list in any case. But what would have happened if someone has raised this issue that actually the company got the contract because this particular manager is known to that company? What would be the impact on the reputation? Even if in the normal course, if that particular company is meritorious and got selected, if there was an allegation like that, what would be the impact on the reputation of the company and reputation of the particular officer that itself? I will tell you one more example that, of course, I didn't have to deal with it. It has just happened. How it happened, I'll tell you. It's official. So my daughter went for selection to the highest level government post at the entry level. That means the civil services in India. And she went. There was a particular board chairperson who was walking in to the board room before the interview. He saw her. He knew her. She was the first one to be interviewed in the day. And as he crossed her, she wished him. He wished her back. He went, and then she was told that your interview will not take place now. Your interview board is being changed, and it will take place later with a different board, different chairperson. And of course, it's stressful when you have prepared for over a year to be interviewed by the Union Public Service Commission of India, to be placed in the civil services. And then suddenly, when you are about to enter into the interview room, you are told that you are not going to be interviewed now, and you are not going to be interviewed by this board, and you are going to be interviewed by another board at a later time in the day. It's very, very stressful. But then you have no option. And she gets interviewed by a different board because there is a conflict of interest report raised. There is a report known as conflict of interest report in the government of India. So what I'm saying is, these situations, I'm just mentioning two of the situations that are there. These situations will be encountered every now and then. And it's more so on the business side. I've talked about two government departments where this has been encountered, more so on the business side, because It's about money. It's about generating revenue. It's about generating profits. Obviously, there are multiple dynamics involved in it. Now, that's where creating ethical workforce, and what is ethics we must understand if we have to create ethical workforce. How do we do it? Why it's important that we have an ethical workforce. Okay, at the core, sustainable ethics is what we need to talk about, and it's about finding a balance between economic growth, social well being, and environmental responsibility. This means making choices that promote long term sustainability rather than long or short term gains. It's not about gains, it's about sustainability. It's benefiting one and all. Of course, yes, you're a business, you must make profit, but sustainability is what should be at the core of your thinking. It also involves considering the needs of future generations. Very, very important, especially in today's world where we are talking about a lot of problems that are cropping up around us and in the environmental space, because there is lack of accountability and responsibility in our actions, which are actually causing a lot of damage to the future generations. We are not looking at outcomes of our exploitative measures that we take, exploitative actions that we take, and taking steps to preserve natural resources and protect the planet for years to come. Trust me, this is something very, very important. Very important. I'm working in two areas. One is, of course, creating ethical workforce in the cybersecurity, and the other area that I'm working in is water, water security. Trust me, these two areas are really suffering very heavily because of unethical behavior, unethical conduct, most of the times unknowingly. That means the outcomes are not known to the individuals who are actually indulging in such activities. Very essential that we make these outcomes known to the people, especially the impact of such outcomes in the future generations. Okay, very, very important. Ethics guide professionals in making decisions that impact their clients, employers, and society. How? By defining behavior which is right, good, and proper, appropriate, right, good, and proper. Professional ethics, when we talk about, because we're talking about creating ethical workforce, that means we are talking about ethics at workplace. Professional ethics encompass the personal, organizational, and corporate standards of behavior. It's standards of behavior expected of professionals. Trust me, honesty, confidentiality, objectivity, respect, and competence, these all go together. These all go together to make a professionally ethical person. Professional ethics specifically apply to the conduct within a professional context, that means our workplace, sometimes requiring more, in fact, most of the times requiring more stringent standards than personal ethics. Personal ethics sometimes because you are going to suffer personally. Whereas in case of professional ethics, you're going to impact the organization, you're going to impact your neighbors, your colleagues, and everyone else who is around you. There are occasions where, because of unethical practice by one person, companies have completely doomed. During Corona, many companies have closed shop because of unethical practices. There are companies which, because of unethical practice by an odd individual, had to pay heavy penalty because of data breach and other issues that are happening in the digital space. Now, coming to the dilemma, what is a dilemma? I was talking about that manager's dilemma when she had to, screen and finalize and select a particular company to render services in our company. An ethical dilemma is a situation where one must choose between two equally unsatisfactory alternatives. What were the unsatisfactory alternatives there for that manager? One, long-time friend's father. Possibly you could have given him the order or the contract. Second unsatisfactory alternative is you have to take a call, quit that, but being on that particular committee. Okay. Seeking guidance, considering consequences, and aligning with ethical standards is the solution. Okay, these are the strategies. Now, what she has done, she sought guidance from, immediately she came up, she walked up to me, she said, So this is the situation. I need your guidance, and in my choice is this. I would like to be recused. Just see how nicely and with such clarity of thought. Similarly, I mentioned about the second example. There was no discussion whether she should be interviewed by that particular chairperson or not. No discussion, nothing. He just went, raised a conflict of report raised on the issue, and she had to be shifted to some other board. Seeking guidance or considering consequences and aligning with ethical standards. This is what is the best strategy. Obviously, in professional settings, professional ethics helps in maintaining integrity and public trust. Most important when we are especially dealing in a company. Okay. Historically, of course, there have been times, possibly earlier, where ethical standards were much higher, and maybe the materialistic thought processes that have crept into our systems over a period of time, exploitative and greedy human nature, has actually caused a lot of damage as far as this particular aspect is concerned, the professional ethics is concerned. Greed need is not a problem, because there is abundance of everything that is required in this world. There is abundance of everything that is required actually. The problem is of greed. A person drawing more than what he is required, whether it is water, whether it is electricity, whether it is money, whether it is making profits, anything you take, it's the greed that actually causes the problem. And over a period of time in the recent past, the greed is actually demonstrated much higher levels of late, rather than being minimalistic, only meeting the needs as was done earlier. So historically, things have been slightly better, definitely, because we see that the environmental degradation is much rapid today than what it was in so many thousands of years so far. Human being has been in existence for so many years, but the degradation has not been as much. In the last 100 years, probably we have caused a lot of damage. Sustainability, we have started talking now, and still there are countries, there are people, there are societies which are not bothered. They couldn't care less for the future generations. They are worried about only amassing wealth or meeting their greedy, desires and objectives and the targets. Professional ethics have evolved from guilds and professional societies establishing codes of conduct. We have had societies when, since beginning, when a human being has started living in a society. Of course, there have been norms, there have been codes of conduct for people. That is how the conduct was regulated. Okay, increasing focus on corporate social responsibility, sustainability, and digital ethics. These are the trends that have slowly started coming into our lives, very slowly, of course. Of course, we have to include greater emphasis on global ethical standards and consideration, especially in digital space. What are ethics? As of now, the whole world is worried about the artificial intelligence, the generative AI, and other aspects of artificial intelligence, how the new and emerging technologies are actually crossing all destructive barriers and creating large scale troubles. So that's where the ethics actually play a great role, and we are yet to find solutions to these problems. Now, what is, when we talk about ethics, what is the difference between ethics and a law? Law can embody ethical principles. They are actually formulated very clearly, whereas ethical behavior actually is not embodied in that manner. There are no regulations, there are no acts, there are no rules, there are no standards. Maybe there are guidelines, but often exceed the legal requirements. The legal requirements are basic minimum. Basic minimum standards are maintained as legal requirements, whereas ethical requirements are almost always well above the standards set legally. Ethics are moral guidelines, while laws are rules established by the establishment, the system. It could be a government, or it could be a company, for all that you know. It's possible that a company has made, say for example, I'll give you a small example. The sexual harassment at workplace. The whole act has been created to protect women from sexual harassment at workplace. But there are companies which have laid down clear guidelines on sexual harassment of men at workplace also. what touches are not permitted, what are the ethical issues when you're dealing as a woman dealing with a man, what is a no, what is a yes. Also, there are companies which have laid down very clearly. While the law is talking about protecting women from sexual harassment at workplace, I'm referring to the Indian context. But the companies have gone one step ahead and said, no, it can happen to the other genders as well. And since it can happen to other genders as well, we might as well come out with certain guidelines, and they, including videos, including clear photographs as to what can construe, what can be actually interpreted as sexual harassment, have been laid down. Okay, that's how ethics are above. Okay, whistleblowing can be legal but may be seen as unethical in certain in professional contexts. Yes, there are situations like that. There is a myth that ethics and profitability cannot coexist, and they are mutually exclusive. The truth is not in that direction. Actually, the truth is otherwise. And in Indian context, at least three of the companies have proved. Uh, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, there is a report known as Crawl report. Crawl report. Okay, Global Fraud Survey. It's known. It is also known as. Okay, it gives a very wide understanding of what all are going wrong as far as the organizations, companies, entities are concerned. Okay, and it gives annual reports, and there is a report within the Asian subcontinent also. It gives report on the countries which are within the Asian continent. Okay, now this scroll report actually gives country wise, sector wise, gender wise, age wise, and designations wise what kind of frauds are going on. Okay, and the report, if you read, it's not very encouraging. Trust me, across the world there are problems, there are ethical issues, serious ethical issues, and the companies which are actually making it to the top ranks as far as the ethical practices are concerned are actually profitable also. Like for example, take Wipro, take Infosys. Wipro, by the way, recently has taken some senior managers to the court because they have violated the ethical practices that are set by the company. Senior management people who have violated. And what did they violate? Something like he is supposed to give a certain notice period and he has not given, and he has started moonlighting. Moonlighting, you all understand, I hope. What is moonlighting? Working outside your own company environment for a remuneration, for benefit. Okay, but these three companies have stood out. They have scored very high in the reports, as well as they are very highly profitable as well. Okay, now what are the things that can happen when the ethical lapses happen? Is loss of trust, legal penalties, financial losses, real world incidents. We will discuss three of them: Volkswagen, the emissions scandal, and then we will also discuss the BP oil spill and Flint water crisis. In the first one, the emission scandal that I'm referring to, it is also known as Dieselgate. This broke out in September 2015. One of the world's largest car manufacturers, Volkswagen, was found to have been using a software in diesel engines that could detect when they were being tested for emissions. Only when they are being tested, that software will alert, and this software, known as defeat device, manipulated the performance of the cars to improve results during the testing. Okay, and what are the issues? The use of the defeat device by Volkswagen was a clear breach of ethical standards. You can't create a device to avoid being caught. Okay, so that's what this company has done. And what has happened? Not only did it involve deceiving customers and regulatory bodies, but it also significantly undermined efforts towards environmental sustainability. Volkswagen's actions contributed to higher levels of pollution, directly contradicting their public commitment to sustainability and environmental responsibility. This is what I'm talking about: greed. This is what I'm talking about: greed. That means they ought not to deceive and in this manner actually degrade this environment. Okay. And what are the consequences of this scandal? This scandal has far-reaching consequences for Volkswagen. What happened? The company faced massive fines amounting to billions of dollars, a significant drop in stock prices, and damage to its reputation. Several company executives faced legal consequences, including charges and resignations. Much muck has actually been visible. It was thrown out as a result of this, and cleanup had to be done. What were the lessons learned? The case highlights the importance of corporate transparency and honesty, especially in industries with significant environment impact. Why significant? Any industry for that matter. It also underscores the long term costs of ethical misconduct, both financially and in terms of brand reputation. Please understand what kind of an impact it has had on the brand that Volkswagen is. It's a huge brand. Now, in another example that we will be discussing quickly, BP oil spill. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill, which occurred in April 2000 in the Gulf of Mexico, is considered one of the worst environmental disasters in the history. Operated by BP, one of the world's leading oil and gas companies, the offshore drilling rig exploded and sank, resulting in a massive oil spill. Over 87 days, an estimated 4.9 million barrels of oil spilled into the Gulf of Mexico, causing extensive damage to the marine and wildlife habitats as well as the fishing and tourism industries. Ethical, what are the ethical issues? Investigations found that BP had ignored critical safety practices, which significantly contributed to the disaster. The event highlighted the risks associated with deep sea drilling and raised questions about the ethical responsibilities of corporations in managing environmental risks. Okay, this is what was found. And what are the consequences? BP faced billions of dollars in fines, cleanup costs, and compensation payments. The spill led to significant legal and regulatory consequences, prompting a reevaluation of industry practices and government policies concerning offshore drilling. It's a massive revamp that had to be done. Now, coming to the third example, Flint water crisis. Flint water crisis began in 2014 when the city of Flint near Michigan switched its water supply from Detroit system to Flint River as a cost-saving measure. They wanted to save cost cutting. That's what happens when the expectations from the business rises very high. Inadequate treatment and testing of the water resulted in a series of major water quality and health issues for the residents of Flint city. Okay, the water from the Flint River was highly corrosive, causing lead from aging pipes to leak into the water supply. This led to extremely high levels of lead, posing a serious public health danger. Residents suffered from a range of health issues, including lead poisoning, skin lesions, and hair loss. The crisis was a result of negligence and failure to adhere to safety protocols in water treatment and testing. It raised significant concerns about environmental justice and the safety of public water systems, especially in underprivileged communities. The Flint water crisis led to numerous lawsuits, the allocation of funds for medical care and water system repairs, and a national debate on aging infrastructure and environmental justice. Now, just imagine what kind of a problems that these three examples have created and what has actually happened. In the end, the losses are much more than the short-term gains that they looked at. Okay. Now coming to the digital world, trust me, this is much worse. Many times we don't even get to know what are the outcomes of these unethical practices. Today, a situation has arrived where a company worth thousands and millions of dollars can be actually put to very high risk by one individual by leaking the data. One individual. For example, the GDPR mandates a certain fine. Similarly, the Indian Data Protection Act mandates a particular amount of fine up to that amount. So, for example, in case of India, it's 250 crore rupees is the penalty for data leakage, data breach. And that means if an individual company is causing data breach, that company can be awarded a fine up to 250 crore rupees. A lot of money. And this can be done by one individual. That's where our organization and the All India Council for Technical Education together have, as a joint initiative, decided to go for measures to create ethical workforce, because each individual matters. Each individual matters in every company, whether he is a peon, whether he is a manager, whether he is the boss. But where does it start? It has to start from the top, especially in case of data driven companies. Data privacy, intellectual property rights, and online conduct, they become major issues. And it has to be top down approach. There are organizations like IEEE which have given guidelines on the technology ethics, but these two, if you just just pay attention and seriously you look at what these two platforms are doing, these two tools are doing, Siri and Alexa, they're constantly listening to you and they're constantly uploading the data elsewhere. You have to be very, very careful. The data breach possibility is very, very high. There are international standards, there are UN resolutions, global compliance requirements are also there. Of course, when we follow them, improved global reputation, better stakeholder relationships, of course, loss of the penalties and other things can be avoided. If we look at the trends, especially in data side, Global Business Ethics Survey is a comprehensive study that provides insight into workplace integrity, ethical standards, and compliance processes and practices at both public and private sector organizations. This Global Business Ethics Survey is different from the Global Fraud Survey that I talked about. Both are slightly different. Okay. Employees continue to face high levels of pressure to compromise. What do they compromise? Compromise workplace standards of the law, or the law. Workplace misconduct is at an all-time high. Especially working from home recently has caused a lot of problems, especially in the digital space. Few employees say they work in a strong ethical culture. They do say, but the results are not corresponding to that. Globally, reporting of observed misconduct is at a record high. It is also probably because of the digital footprints being easily tracked. It's also possible that the misconducts were happening earlier also. But today it's easier to do misconduct because of this data thing I have mentioned to you. Retaliation against employees who report misconduct continues to occur at unacceptable rates. If anyone is reporting misconduct, there is a retaliation, there is no reward. These things are actually causing a lot of difficulty. On the Indian front, the Indian companies are aligning their strategies with environmental, social, and government principles for sustainability and responsible business practices. Trust me, last few years have seen massive shift towards the ESG initiatives. There's so much happening, and regulatory bodies like SEBI, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, promote ESG reporting and integration into corporate practices. Companies are enhancing their corporate governance structures for greater transparency and accountability. The ease of doing business has actually improved a lot because of this particular transparency and accountability is being increased, and streamlining the processes and reducing the levels of processing, reducing the level that itself actually reduces the opportunity for unethical practices. The lesser the levels of processing, lesser the opportunity for unethical practice. That's what the reality is. SEBI undertook a major corporate governance initiative in 1999 to raise standards of good corporate governance in India. And there are ethical practices put in place. There are standard operating procedures. There are trainings that are conducted in terms of the company employees to be aligned with the ESG initiatives. Okay, India's adherence to international business ethical norms is a complex issue, although various measures have been initiated. Like, for example, the new education policy. What happens is uh, the students and the children are supposed to be initiated very early as far as these ethical practices at workplace are concerned. They have to be ingrained into them. For a reason unknown, the Indian education system, the lower and middle education system and the higher education system also did not have the moral education for a brief period. And of course, now the new education policy has come and they are talking about the ethical education under the new education policy. There is Washington Accord, which talks about in engineering students how ethics has to be taught at par with the other core subjects. Or there is the Seoul Accord, which talks about the ethics, professional ethics for the computer science students and the computer science engineers. Likewise, there are bodies which have created these systems, and how well they are implemented is more important. Okay, widespread and ingrained corruption is evident, and that's what is being fought by the government of the day. And there is a definite positive outcomes that are visible. Limited accountability is being addressed. Normalization, business and governance. I told you, ease of doing business has improved quite considerably. Opportunities in actually promoting transparency. Digital platforms have brought in so much of transparency. The Digital India, Digidhan, the online payment systems, even for 1 rupee, 2 rupees, also you can actually make online payment. It makes the life a lot easier as far as the ethical practices are concerned. The pilferage, the spillage, are the corrupt practices that were associated with the direct benefit system, DBS. That has actually come down very, very heavily, and digitization has made a lot of impact on that. Strengthening institutions, of course, is happening. Inconsistent standards and weak enforcement were a norm, but now, of course, things have changed quite a bit. Okay, ethics, professional training, and ethical role models are obviously they are being followed now. I told you the new education policy has brought in a certain shift in thought process as far as this particular aspect is concerned. Okay, ethical companies often experience lower turnover rates, better brand reputation, customer loyalty. Obviously, see the problem with the ethical workforce creation and maintenance used to be earlier the thought process that if you are ethical, your profitability will come down. If you are ethical, your clients will go away. You have to have a certain amount of flexibility to be able to please the influencers to be able to get the business. This kind of thought process was there, and that is what has actually changed now, because of which there is absolute transparency that is seeping in a slow manner only, of course, because of the digitization, because of the ease of doing business. Because, say for example, if a simple example I'll give you, for issue of passport, there were times where a passport used to take about 2 to 6 months period, various verifications, various processes, various checks. All those things is passé now. Now what is happening? You can actually effectively get a passport within a week's time. That is the speed at which this particular the processing has improved. And I can give a personal example. I applied for a passport. On the third day of my application for the passport, I received a call from the police station saying, "Sir, we have to verify your antecedents and we have to give a verification report. Can you please come down to our police station?" I was surprised because till now I was not used to visiting a police station for verification for passport. The police would come home and then do the verification and go. So I went there. I went with my family. Both of us went, and both of us applied for the passport, my wife and self. And when I went there, I asked them. In fact, I asked the officer concerned. I said, "Why this shift? Why are you calling us to the police station instead of you visiting the home and doing the verification?" Said, "Sir, two things happen. One, today, because of the digitization, the address proof is actually there in any case. So you can't, because of this Aadhaar system that is there in India, the unique ID system. The second thing is, earlier when we were sending the policemen to verify for passport or any of these services like that, or for government job also, what was happening was the people who went expected that they be given some gifts, some money, or something else in return for doing the verification. And in the fear that if they don't give money or some gift, the people would give them. Otherwise, they will think they used to fear that the report may be delayed or some wrong report may be given. Whereas, if you come to the police station, the verification is done in an appropriate manner and it is all under camera. There is nothing that can actually go wrong. And trust me, I went there. It took all of 2 minutes for me for my verification to be completed. All of 2 minutes, the verification was done. So, as a result, what has happened? Third day, the verification report has been completed. Same day, they have uploaded online. It's online now, everything. And seventh day, I had my passport reaching me. Now, these are the things that are actually happening. Now, these things will definitely bring in higher satisfaction levels to the customers. I'm talking about the government. If government systems can improve so much, obviously on the private businesses also, the corporate sector also, there can be huge improvements that can happen. Now, there are companies which, like I'll give you another example. This was there published in the newspapers earlier sometime back. There is a case where one of the MNC, they wanted to acquire certain land. Of course, I believe they are selling it back now. So because of the downsizing. So this company wanted to acquire certain land for expansion. So the boss, the head of the organization, called one of the senior managers, general manager, who is localite. He called him and said, we would need to acquire a certain piece of land for our expansion plans. So that GM suggested to him that, look, if we go through the official way, probably this would be the cost, and if we go through the unofficial way, probably this would be the cost. So the head of the organization said, no, no, we can't go the unofficial way. We have to do the official way only. It's official. So this matter was between them for a while. In the meantime, the head of the organization, in an informal way, reported his headquarters elsewhere, where his headquarters is. It's an MNC, multinational company. And at the end of it, they said, no, follow the process. Follow due process. Follow due process, the message has come. But this general manager was so very convincing in his arguments and in his way of approach to this problem, this issue or this subject, that over a period of 2.5 months, he was able to convince the head of the department that nothing will happen. Nobody will even know whether you bought it through the official way or unofficial way. So don't worry about it. I will have everything done in a very smooth manner. And the head of the organization succumbed. When he succumbed, they went and paid some bribe to some politician. It's there in the newspaper, so that's why I'm quoting this. When they paid some bribe to the politician obviously has helped allocation of certain land at a very very nominal price, and they got the land at a very nominal price. They saved a lot of money, and when in the annual report, when the report went to the headquarters, the headquarters raised a question as to how did you manage to get it at such a cheaper price, whereas the market rate is showing this much. And then they ordered an inquiry internally. Okay, and what happened? Obviously, it was all over the newspapers. The company lost a lot of reputational issues were there. In fact, they got negative publicity unnecessarily, avoidable negative publicity. This is something which could have definitely been avoided, especially when the instructions are very clear, when the standard operating procedure is very clear, and the message was clearly do the due diligence and follow the process. Just follow the process. This is something which next thing I would like to talk about is the internal frauds by the employees. Now, this is where the one is top down approach we're talking about. The other one is how each individual can actually contribute. Even if the value system that I have grown in is of a little liberty towards taking shortcuts, I better be careful as far as my professional ethics is concerned. One small example I'll give you. One of the companies in India has a policy that an employee would be shown a pink slip even if he is claiming a very small amount illegally by showing, reflecting travel allowance or any other allowances that are authorized. That company has clear policy. Even if it is 1 rupee, if it is proved that it is not due and but claimed by an individual employee, simply a standard format show cause notice is given and he is shown the pink slip. He is shown the door straight away. Now imagine such kind of a practice being there and being implemented. Obviously, that company is one amongst the topmost ethical companies in India, Wipro. So yeah, we have just discussed about three companies that have been on top as far as the ethical practices are concerned. Now that's how you build a culture. That's how you build a culture amongst your workforce of being ethical at workplace. It has to be flowing down from the top, and it has to be consistently followed. Consistently followed. Now, what will be the outcome? Outcome will be ethical companies often experience lower turnover. It, the people leaving the company and churning that happens. Attrition rate. Attrition rate becomes much lower. Obviously, the brand reputation is better. That's why you will find many of the employees when they join the Tatas, they retire in Tatas. The Tata Steel, especially the people who join there, despite the fact that there are many private companies as well now in India in steel industry, there is huge competition to Tata Steel. But still, if someone has joined the Tata Steel, he retires, and he generally he or she would aspire that his or her children also should join the same company, because that is the kind of environment they have created, that is the kind of brand they have built, that is the kind of practices and processes that they have built around. And obviously it will increase the customer loyalty. Okay, transparency, stakeholder engagement, and ethical training programs, they become very important, especially in organizations which are wanting to create a culture of ethical workplace. Creating ethical workplaces, very essential. And who makes the workplace? Employees. You and I make the workplace. You and I make the workplace. And if we are following the ethical practices, obviously the whole the organization will be ethical, and that's how it can always be beneficial for the organization building. For this one, I'll tell you another example. There is a particular bank, huge bank. The chairperson of the bank actually was globe trotter. That means she was traveling all over the world with every important delegation that visited out of India on official dealings, official visits. That kind of a powerful chairperson she was. And when the conflict of interest issues broke out, things turned very bad. It's all over the newspaper, so I can say that. Although it is sub judice, the matter has not yet been finally disclosed. But yes, reputational loss has happened already. Already, reputational loss has happened to a large extent. She is no more the chairperson, and the bank has lost a lot of goodwill. That's at the highest level. Now, setting the standards, setting these ethical practices, setting these processes, setting right examples starts at the top. That's how it is. Same thing happened with another bank where the chairperson of the bank has created and nurtured that bank on his own hands. He built it into a big empire. And finally, there were issues of conflict of interest, and he is behind the bars. Things can go wrong. In today's world, ladies and gentlemen, please understand, across the world, you cannot hide your mistake for too long, because there is evidence left in digital space at some stage or the other. And any evidence, any footprint in the digital space is traceable, is trackable, and it can be definitely brought to the open. You leave any footprints in the electronic space, they are there for good. Permanently, they are there. That's how it is. That's why one needs to be always following the ethical practices and best practices of transparency, stakeholder engagement, and ethical ways of doing business. There are, of course, I told you, there are companies which earmarks certain amount of money to be used for the for wheel dealers, for underhand dealings, which is definitely not encouraged. What are the strategies? Implementing codes of conduct, ethical training, and whistleblower policies. Top-down leadership approach, leadership role. Obviously, it's always the top-down approach that helps, especially when you want to build a culture. That's I've already mentioned. Tools like employee surveys, audits, and ethical performance indicators. Employee surveys, especially when they are anonymous. When they are anonymous, like for example, I remember in one of the organizations that I was serving, we did a secret survey on the the ethical practices being followed by managers of certain level and above, a certain level and above only, of course. And we got very interesting outcomes, results. So these all, they are all tools. They help a lot. Okay. Ethical standards influence fair and transparent decision making in organizations. Of course, ease of governance, we discussed about it. Ethical practices can simplify decision making processes and reduce conflicts. That's what is ease of doing business or ease of governance. Okay. Government, of course, has to promote the professional ethics by setting the standards, by setting the regulations, things like that. Like, for example, the Vigilance Commission has a manual, a full manual on how to do the government processes. Similarly, for the businesses also, there are business ethics laid down by the MCA. What is to be done, what can be done, what cannot be done, and things like that. But there are still many areas where there is everything is not black and white. That's where we need our top leaders to prescribe or actually profess and follow the good ethical practices. Companies Act, of course, I told you the government has done a lot in terms of bringing in the CSR and other regulations. Discuss the national campaigns, like I told you, the Vigilance Commission. We can we can take that as an example where Vigilance Commission actually runs campaigns every year. Every year they run campaign vigilance weeks for the government employees, and when government is cleaning act, obviously it spills out to the businesses also. Always it's an environment that is created, it's a culture that's getting created. If the national culture is of no tolerance to the unethical practices, obviously the businesses cannot sustain with unethical practice. Say, for example, one business is involving in giving some bribe to a government agency, and government officers refuse to take bribe. I'll give a small example. There was a business house which was supplying the films to Doordarshan. I was in Doordarshan those days. The the television company of the government. And on one particular Deepavali day, there was a vendor who had some movies to be approved. He had left a gift with my staff saying that this is for your sir. So when I came to know, I told them to call him and ask him to take it back. And he says very bravely, he says, "Sir, I have been um, giving gifts to the successive additional directors general in this office for so many years. You must accept it." I said, "Please take it away immediately." Next year again I was there. He tried again something similar. No. Third year onwards he stopped coming. He was not visible there. Obviously, the message is very clear. Okay. These initiatives definitely shape the Vigilance Commission for the weeks and the campaigns that are run by the government against unethical practices, the transparency requirements by the companies, the MCS campaigns. These all bring in a lot of good results. Okay, community education, of course. One, government, of course, government has to do certain things, but it has to trickle down to the community, and community is the one which actually supplies the people, whether it is employees, whether it is students. All of them come from the communities, all of them come from the society. And if the society is not able to informally educate, one is formal education and written things that are there in the books and all that, but in addition to that, how by example people are doing things to be transparent, doing things to be ethical in their practice, that's more important. The it's by example. Okay, how the community is developing these habits in the people, and what kind of people. For example, you can feel the difference when you are dealing in businesses. Sometimes you will come across certain people, you know that okay, they are going to be offering you bribes, things like that, because they used to it. Maybe the community is tolerating or accepting or encouraging, maybe we don't. There are some who will not. That's what. And it has to be trickling down to the grassroots level finally. It has to trickle down to the, like, for example, the digitization, the digital India movement that is there. It has obviously trickled down to the last man. And today, the pilferage is not there. Even in the employment guarantee programs, where it was famously said that only 16 paise was reaching the destination earlier. Now, it's not the case. It's going directly. There is no pilferage. That is where the difference can be made, when the communities start taking part in these campaigns, and these initiatives are getting reflected in the community's activities, in informal education, in communities activities, or in setting examples, and where required, to shun the people who are practicing unethical practices. Very, very essential. Okay. And communities, obviously communities can build this environment and this ecosystem by collaborating with each other, working together with each other in bringing the uh, ethical values. Okay. Obviously individual is at the core of all this. If there is a saying, some very popular guru says, at the core of every problem is human being, at the core of every problem on this earth. And he goes on saying that if human being is not there, probably the earth will flourish like anything. And when the movement was restricted for a brief period because of corona, in some cities the number of peacocks and other animals which were not visible earlier, they became so many. They became so bold, and they started moving into the in the populated areas also, because human beings were not moving there. Just I'm giving one example. So individuals, integrity, and moral courage, these are the things that will help. Of course, the top-down approach is very, very important. The government has to support. There have to be policies. There have to be laws. There have to be laws implemented very seriously. There have to be communities which have to create that environment where informal education is part of the day-to-day lives, and the encouragement is given to the ethical practices. Then, of course, at the individual level, also you have to have that courage, to be able to stand up and say, no, sorry, this is not acceptable at all. Okay. And one has to educate himself oneself constantly. Like, for example, I was talking about the manual of vigilance commission. Okay. Ethics are very important for business continuity and societal well-being. I don't think there is any emphasis required on this particular aspect. Individual and collective efforts towards maintaining high ethical standards are very, very essential for sustainability. Each of us needs to commit to ethical practices in professional and personal lives. That's the bottom line. Of course, a word about Clean Exit, an ethics and behavior rating platform aimed at professionals. We work in collaboration with All India Council for Technical Education, Government of India, Ministry of Education, and we are part of the ISAC, leading a non-profit organization working in the cyber security. And this the Clean Exit rating platform, Ethics Card is a brand name, is designed to reduce misconducts and frauds in organizations by rating professionals. We train, we certify, we rate, we give insurance against misdeeds of the individuals. These are all the various processes, including exit talk. For cybersecurity experts, developers, and everyone else, it is available. This platform is available. In case if you want to contact me, of course, I'm available on the LinkedIn. We have our own websites, and we would be very, very happy for any future collaboration that anyone wishes to enter into.